It is Sunday evening, and you are likely sitting in that peculiar, thick silence that only exists a few hours before Monday morning. It is the time of the Sunday Scaries, a moment where the distractions of the weekend have faded, and you are left staring at the ceiling, or perhaps a half-eaten pizza, asking yourself the same terrifying question: what exactly am I doing with my life? You look back at the last 7 days and try to find a meaningful anchor, but all you see is a blurred montage of context switching, unreturned emails, and that third hobby you started on Tuesday, something about artisanal soap making, that is already gathering dust. You feel a cold, hollow knot in your stomach because you realize that while you are vibrating with potential, you are also drifting. You aren't afraid of the hard work. You are paralyzed by the realization that another week has been harvested by the digital void, and you are no closer to the person you promised you would become. As your resident mind decoder, I'm here to tell you that this isn't just a bad mood or a bit of weekend blues. This is your prefrontal cortex sounding a biological alarm. For the deep-thinking introvert and the high-functioning multitasker, the feeling of wasting your life is a specific neurological signal that your brain's hardware is being used to run the wrong curriculum. We have spent our previous conversations talking about the graveyard of hobbies and the geometry of an M-shaped career, but today we need to move past productivity and talk about existence. I am issuing a formal neuroscientist's warning. Wasting your life isn't a moral failing. It is a biological hazard that is physically altering the way your brain processes time, memory, and your very sense of self. To understand why you feel like you are standing still while the world moves at warp speed, we have to look at the neurobiology of time perception. Have you ever noticed that when you were a child, a summer afternoon felt like an eternity, but now an entire year disappears in the blink of an eye? In neuropsychology, this is linked to how the brain encodes new information. When you are learning, exploring, and building those deep pillars of mastery we discussed, your brain is in a state of high-fidelity recording. It creates dense, vivid neural maps. But when you are trapped in the dash-shaped life, knowing a little about everything, reacting to every notification, and drifting between a dozen shallow interests, your brain stops recording. It switches to safe mode. Because your experiences are repetitive, distracted, and lack depth, your internal clock accelerates. Wasting your life, quite literally, makes your life feel shorter. You aren't just losing time, you are losing the neural data that makes a life feel lived. For the scanner brain, this existential waste is even more toxic because of the dopamine-seeking loop. Because you are naturally tuned to find connections and far transfer insights, you are hyper-vulnerable to the novelty high. You think you are exploring when you spend 4 hours in a Wikipedia rabbit hole about 14th century plumbing, but neurologically you are just a pigeon in a Skinner box pecking at a glass screen for a random reward. This constant seeking without building creates a state of chronic telomere shortening, the biological caps on your DNA that measure cellular aging. Research suggests that the stress of drifting, of living in a state of perpetual unfulfilled potential, elevates your baseline cortisol to a level that mimics physical trauma. Your amygdala, that ancient smoke detector, is permanently chirping because it senses the gap between who you are and who you could be as a threat to the organism. The pain you feel on a Sunday night is the loss aversion of the soul. Humans are biologically programmed to fear losing what they have more than they desire to gain what they don't. On Sunday, you aren't just mourning the end of the weekend, you are mourning the loss of the version of you that was supposed to make progress this week. You look at your stability pillar job and feel like a cog. You look at your curiosity bridge and feel like a dabbler. You feel like a jack of all trades who has finally run out of trades to master. But here is the perspective shift. You aren't dumber and you aren't lazier than you were 5 years ago. You are simply suffering from cognitive fragmentation. You have been trying to solve a multi-dimensional life using a one-dimensional plan. You have been waiting for motivation to strike, not realizing that motivation is a fleeting chemical vapor, whereas systemic architecture is a biological fortress. If you continue to treat your life as a series of random reactions to external stimuli, you are performing a slow-motion high-tech lobotomy on yourself. Your working memory, your mental RAM, is being clogged with the residue of 1,000 unfinished projects and open loops. Based on the Zeigarnik effect, your brain refuses to let go of these uncompleted tasks, which means even when you are trying to relax tonight, a portion of your brain is still stuck in the unstarted work of last Tuesday. This is why you feel tired even when you haven't done anything. You are leaking life force through the cracks in your unmanaged operating system. It is time to stop the leak. It is time to stop the drift. It is time to apply the M-shaped modeling solution to your very existence before the clock runs out on your potential. So, if we accept that drifting is a biological hazard, how do we stop the engine from revving in neutral? How do we stop being a dash-shaped ghost and start being an M-shaped powerhouse? The secret to ending the existential drift isn't to work harder. It's to fundamentally re-engineer your relationship with time and curiosity. We need to move from the frantic, low-fidelity state of trying to do everything to the calm, high-resolution state of serial mastery. The reason you feel like you are wasting your life is that you are treating your time as a single, overwhelming block of 40 years, when you should be treating it as a series of distinct, high-intensity seasons. To model this solution, we must first perform a neurological flush of your current ambitions. The paralysis of choice you feel is actually cognitive entropy, a state of disorder where your brain has so many potential paths that it spends all its energy on the friction of indecision. To fix this, you must pick one pillar of mastery for the next 12 to 18 months. Just one. I know your scanner brain is currently screaming that if you pick Python coding, you are abandoning your dream of being a Renaissance historian. But here is the neuropsychological truth. By committing to one leg of your M for a season, you're actually freeing up your mental RAM. You aren't choosing for life, you're choosing for fluency. Once you master the core 80% of a skill, the neural pathways become so efficient that they move from the expensive prefrontal cortex to the low-cost basal ganglia. You graduate. You don't quit. You simply automate that part of your identity and move to the next leg. While you're building that deep pillar, you must reframe your day job using the Einstein model of strategic stability. Most of the Sunday scaries come from the feeling that your job is a cage that is stealing your time. But for a polymath, a stable, low-drain job is actually a high-performance battery charger. Albert Einstein knew that his mind needed the quiet, predictable environment of the patent office to wander the stars. If your day job consumes 110% of your mental battery, you have no surplus left for the far transfer insights that make your mind unique. You must organize the boring parts of your life, your bills, your schedule, your basic work tasks, not because you want to be a specialist, but because you are protecting the metabolic energy of the integrator. You aren't wasting your life by having a job. You are wasting your life by letting that job's extrinsic load haunt your nights. The third pillar of this existence reset is the external brain. A scanner brain is a high-output idea factory, but it is a frankly terrible filing cabinet. Trying to remember every random spark of curiosity is what leads to that mental leak and the feeling of burnout. You need a system, a Zettelkasten, a digital garden, or even a simple physical journal to capture your fleeting obsessions. When you write down an idea for a floating garden or a new business model, you are sending a signal of psychological closure to your brain. You are telling your biology, it's safe to forget this now. It's saved on the hard drive. This flushes the residue from your RAM and allows you to be fully present in the path you have chosen for this season. You stop being a person who knows a little about everything in a shallow, anxious way, and you become a person who can see the music in the data because you have the cognitive space to find the connections. As you look toward the upcoming week, I want you to remember that your potential is not a trophy to be admired, it is a resource to be spent. You weren't meant to be a single narrow gear in someone else's machine, but you also weren't meant to be a cloud of unanchored potential. You were designed to be a bridge. The self-blame you feel for not being organized or specialized is a relic of an old-world philosophy that is being dismantled by the complex, wicked reality we now live in. The world doesn't need more especialistas who are too afraid to step out of their lane. It needs polymaths who have learned how to manage their biological hardware. The self-blame ends tonight. The drift ends when the system begins. Pick your first pillar. Reframe your stability. Externalize your curiosity. When you stop surviving your environment and start engineering it, the Sunday Scaries transform into a quiet, polymathic confidence. You aren't wasting your life anymore. You are simply building a bridge between worlds that only you can see. To help you navigate this transition and design your first season of mastery, I have created a resource called the Existential Audit. It is a simple, science-backed framework to help you identify your current mental leaks, close your open loops, and architect your first M-shaped season. You can download it using the link in the description. Stop pecking at the glass screen for random rewards. Reclaim your focus. Rebuild your IQ. Decode your mind. I'm the Mind Decoder, and I'll see you in the next one.